you earlier, we have not yet even had the sanity board in this case. And that's going to be problematic. Early on, I voiced any objection to a sanity board being conducted by DOD, Department of Defense officials. Why? Because look what's happened to the mental health community in the military. Superiors of Major Hasan, anywhere from 8 to 10 senior officers, doctors, physicians themselves, are now under investigation. There have been statements by senior people in the mental health community that this incident has had a significant impact on morale. And what we're supposed to now, against this background, turn around and hope that other military psychiatrists or mental health professionals are going to give us a fair evaluation. That's an issue that is yet to be fully addressed. And our position has been, until we get a lot of the information that I just mentioned to you, I don't think we're equipped from the defense side, and I don't think any sanity board, however and whoever it's composed of, are going to be in a position where they can make a proper determination. There's just too much evidence out there that goes to the mental state of the defendant. His communications with third parties, his conduct while he was at Walter Reed, the statements that he may have made to other individuals, all of that directly reflect or circumstantially reflect a mental state that I think has to be addressed. But we haven't been given that discovery. They're hiding the ball.
Who would make up the sanity board?
Interesting question. They could not secure enough people locally because of conflicts. Normally in sanity boards, when here at Fort Hood, and I've handled a lot of cases where sanity boards have to be conducted for military defendants at Fort Hood. Customarily, they're done at Fort Hood. That's been ruled out in this case for obvious reasons. When we can't do them locally, we used to go to places like Walter Reed, where you could get the gold standard. Well, that now has been ruled out because of the ongoing investigation up there. So the Army has already been forced to have to reach out, not just outside of Texas, but outside of even the U.S. Army, to try and assemble a group that would compose the sanity board. They have not formally met because that proceeding, as I indicated earlier, was delayed until the conclusion of the Article 32 hearing. The Army's regulations provide that in many cases when you have an Article 32 hearing, which is yet to be conducted in this case, that report should be made available to the sanity board. And I'm very glad that at least it was delayed because we've now experienced these other issues that directly impact on whether or not he can even get a fair sanity board by folks from the military community. Our position has been any sanity board ought to be conducted by folks independent of the Public Health Service in the United States Army or the Department of Defense. I don't trust them. There's just too much going on in this case by senior levels of the administration of the Department of Defense. This case is not a routine case. It is not going through the normal procedures, pretrial procedures that you'd expect in a court-martial case. I've said to folks, and I'll stand by it again, I believe this case is being choreographed by senior members of the administration, and the folks that are down here signing the papers that are served on me and are associated with the trial process, they're just they're receiving orders. They're taking their directives from others.
What do you think the administration would like to see happen in this case?
Well, when you say the administration, that's broad. It could be, you're talking about the executive branch, the DOD, but clearly there are issues in this case that have given a black eye to the Army. The mental health community is certainly under the looking glass in terms of what it did or did not do. We've already seen that some members of Major Hasan's or senior leadership while at Walter Reed are being looked at for possible punishment. There's serious issues on the intelligence side of the house. And I'm going to be honest with you, there are also some serious, I think, issues on the legal side of the house. I'm very, very concerned as to the involvement by senior military JAG personnel at Fort Hood as this case is going through the court-martial process. We've had the involvement of that legal community at Fort Hood in a number of things that already, I think, in my mind, call into question their impartiality or ability to fairly and impartially and objectively evaluate the case. There have been investigations directed at Fort Hood under Army Regulation 15-6 that involved members of the legal community, even as witnesses. Many people don't realize that the senior legal advisor over at Fort Hood now is already precluded from taking actions on the Hasan case. Now, how unique is that? That the senior legal advisor at Fort Hood, because of his own involvement or his own status as being a witness in an investigation that I only received yesterday, is not going to be able to formally advise the commander about this particular case. Now, although he's disqualified, the next question is, well, if the senior person is disqualified, what, if any, impact does that have on the folks who work for him? We've already seen what's happened out at Walter Reed in the mental health community when the charge is made that someone either did something wrong. Look how many heads are about to roll in the mental health community. So, in those three broad areas, intelligence, mental health, and legal, the Army has got a lot of soul searching to do to determine whether or not, in the past, they acted correctly or not. And I'm not suggesting that any of that is a defense, but it certainly calls into question whether or not you can have a fair trial. The charge sheet that I am working to prepare a defense against lists 13 victims of murder and 32 victims of attempted premeditated murder. And yet the commanding general at Fort Hood authorized a survey several months ago to try and make a determination as to how the events of 5 November may have impacted on the community as a whole. And guess what? It's the Army officials who tell us that there are somewhere in the vicinity of 1,113 victims. So, yeah, you know, it's evidence like that that calls into question whether or not you can have a fair trial at a place like Fort Hood. It's harder to argue that you can't get a fair trial or a fair pretrial investigation. But, I don't know, something deep down inside of me tells me that the Army's not going to, or the Army's going to be opposed to moving this case to another location for a trial. And, look, I was a member of the military community for 30 years, and I still consider, my heart's still with the military community. But I don't think Major Hasan can get a fair trial at Fort Hood. And that sentiment has been shared with me by numerous other people who, like me, have close contacts with the Army.
How is